What's up guys, Deroir here and welcome to another episode of Hype Time, and may I say, this week's news is probably the single most exciting blog post I've read in a long while. Specifically because, as many of you guys already know about me, I have a deep-seated passion for Fractals of the Mist. So as I came home from my vacation the other day, opened up my browser and saw the title of this week's blog post, my eyesight literally started to blur due to the adrenal overexcitement I experienced at that particular moment. Ooh. Now, first of all, I'd like to point out that I don't necessarily love every detail that was announced, and there are still a lot of details about the changes that haven't been touched on at all. But nonetheless, I'm gonna try to dig through the specifics, compare that to our current system, and give my own thoughts about the entire thing to highlight to you guys exactly what has gotten me so hyped. So this week we got a lot more information on some of the things that will be changing with the 5-man dungeon called Fractals of the Mists. Mind you, it is clearly highlighted that this info in and of itself is not part of the to be determined challenging group content that was announced a long time ago, which we still haven't heard anything about. This side note could on its own conceivably signify a possibility that dungeons as we know them won't be included in this concept of challenging group content, which furthers the notion that challenging group content itself might be for larger parties than 5. But let's not dwell on that thought for now, because ArenaNet's goal with these changes to Fractals is still to increase the difficulties, so I'm alright with that for now. Okay, so long story short, the entire Fractal system as we know it is being revamped to some degree. Everything from how we engage a single dungeon run to how we're rewarded. So first of all, currently we have 50 difficulty levels of Fractals, each consisting of 3 different Fractals or islands, as it appears the developers are calling them, and a final boss fractal. For each 10 difficulty levels, there is a daily bonus chest you can get from completing a set of somewhat randomly generated set of fractals within the respective level range. And each level above 30 has differentiating challenges called instabilities. So naturally, as the difficulty increases, so does the quality of the loot. Supposedly. For a decent group, each of these daily reward chests takes approximately somewhere between 30 to 60 minutes, and for less skilled groups it can take a whole lot longer. This is all getting changed. In the future, one difficulty level will simultaneously represent one specific fractal as well as one specific instability, which in itself means that, for example, level 35 might have the cliffside fractal with the stormy weather instability, but every other cliffside fractal that you encounter won't have the same instability. It'll be unique for every level, which not only makes it more simple with a much more static choice every time, it also gives players a better opportunity to fine-tune their skills at a specific level, which in turn also makes it more approachable for newer players than the current partially randomly generated set of fractals that we currently have, which is all fine and dandy in itself. Apart from this, the max difficulty level is being raised to 100. In addition, after scale 50, the difficulty curve will change to adjust not only the health and outgoing damage of creatures, but also other stats like precision and toughness. Dependent on the stats that are changed for the different mobs, different builds could potentially function much better at certain levels compared to others, say our meta builds, which may allow for condition heavy builds or perhaps support builds or Valkyrie warriors to become core additions to certain levels, which also promotes trait versatility for players to be able to actually complete certain stuff. I mean, anything can happen when the current instabilities are being reworked alongside at least 50 new instabilities for every level above 50. We may come to see some really wacky and extremely punishing instabilities, but perhaps that's a bit too much to ask for. Well, since the entire structure is changing, so will the reward system. When this goes live, our daily reward chest will be split into 3 distinct difficulty ranges. This means that for each difficulty range you will need to do 3 different fractal levels in order to get your daily bonus chest. You can't just simply play 3 level 49 swamp fractals in a row. Also, on a side note, I love this quote from one of the devs. Just because it's swamp doesn't mean it will be easy to grind from 1 to 92. Level 92 is no joke. This just sets my expectations too high. Now, apart from the daily chests, they're adding yet another kind of reward system, and this is where it perhaps gets really interesting. At the end of every fractal, you'll find a lockbox in the final chest called a fractal encryption. These lockboxes will have special loot, including minis, a new ascended aquatic breather, yes please, as well as high-level crafting materials, which I'll talk more about in a bit, and also other unspecified rewards. At first, when I read this, I couldn't help myself but think about the lockboxes at the end of Twilight Arbor's Aether Path, and I think this is exactly what it'll be like, but hopefully with some actual worthwhile drops with proper RNG implemented. We would then have to gather 5 key parts by looting it from mobs and then combine them to make a full key. Oh, and don't worry, these will be tradable, exactly like you would buy the Aether key pieces. On that note, just keep in mind the price of Aether key pieces started at a very insane level, and now there's simply an overabundance, which is just some food for thought. Now, Fractals already have quite a few glamorous loot drops that some players, myself very much included, have been chasing for years now. Well, we'll now be able to at least purchase the Fractal weapon skins. What? Praise the Lord RNGesus in all his mercy. These will be available for pristine relics that we currently get from the daily bonus chests. For a long while now, I've had my suspicions about this becoming a thing someday, and so in tandem, I've contemplated a specific thought that I would like to discuss with you guys. How many relics is one weapon worth to you? See, the thing is, to people like me who've played Fractals for so long, the price that I'm mentally willing to pay for a skin like that has inflated to an insane point. Look at it this way, simply because the weapons have been so hard to acquire and so much time has been invested already, I would probably be more willing to shell out a much bigger number than would a person who simply has no grasp on the actual statistical chance of you getting the skin you actually want. Just earlier today, my buddy particular dug up an older calculation on this exact thought, and statistically, you have a 90% chance of acquiring the skin you want if you complete your daily 50, 40, 30 every single day for 7 months. 90%, that's nuts, because after 2 years, I still don't have my fractal sword. The tension has literally been building up for years for a lot of players. Now, I don't believe ArenaNet will be going for a price level that indicates 7 months of work for a single skin, so what would actually be fair? Well, to that I sat down and compared the full price and time invested to our current dungeon armor and weapon vendors. Completing a single dungeon collection would approximately take somewhere between 3 to 4 months of daily runs. And so realistically, simply looking at these numbers, the fair price for fractal skins would be in the range of about 20 or 30 pristine relics. Now, because over time I have been primed to believe that fractal skins hold a much more exclusive place than regular dungeon gear, I honestly have a hard time imagining fractal skins being this cheap to get. Sure, the entire collection of only 19 weapons will still take roughly 3 to 4 months to complete, but that's still insane to me to even think about. So I leave it to you guys. What would be a fair price for the fractal weapon skins? I know I usually ask you guys a question at the end of my videos, but today I've got several things I want to discuss. Give your thoughts in the comments down below and let's move on for now. Additionally, a new version of the fractal weapon skins is being created, but will only be obtainable at the new higher fractal scales. These weapons will look like this. You couldn't just at least have stuck with the grayish misty theme. You just had to go full golden boy again, didn't you, ArenaNet? My personal opinion aside, these weapon skins won't have the same RNG horror as the old ones currently has. Sure, they'll still only be available as drops, but any skin you acquire can be turned into one of the skins that you're missing, which is a huge relief in itself. Also, the original weapon skins will get a collection achievement tied to them, and so I believe these golden ones might as well. Another thing that will be introduced is the addition of a legendary back piece called Ad Infinitum. There's probably a bad joke about Buzz Lightyear hiding in there somewhere, but I'll pass on that opportunity for now. This thing looks glorious and takes after the design of the fractal capacitors. And just like all future precursor and legendary items, this precursor will be account bound and can't be traded. It must be earned. This is set to incorporate timed boss encounters, wait what? As well as collections of items both inside and outside of Fractals, and on top of this, the process also includes the crafting professions. Now, I can understand why there's a need for this collection to be obtainable outside of Fractals as well, due to the fact that a lot of players may not want to play a whole lot of Fractals, but as with everything else, they still want the shiny thing. Still, perhaps I'd just personally prefer to have these timed boss encounters be some of the bosses seen inside the Fractals, especially with the introduction of fractal leaderboards finally coming. Let's see if they actually implement it this time. The final step of transforming the precursor into a legendary back piece will also include brand new materials which seem to only be obtainable through ascended salvaging. Yes, finally, a way to get rid of my hundreds of rings I've got stored up. I know, I have a hoarder problem. Now, this won't just be for rings, but also for ascended armor and weapon salvage, which, in addition to dark energy that is available through a chance at every salvage, there's also different materials depending on the type of item that you salvage. Finally, there's also going to be a whole lot more achievements and sub-objectives available that they don't really talk about that much, but in itself is quite exciting. Now, through all this info, we still have no clear answer as to where the upcoming Fractal Mastery system will fit in. We know it's going to be a thing, we just don't know exactly how it'll work. So here are my guesses. First of all, I think it's obvious that the legendary back piece will be included in the Mastery line, so I'll simply skip that part. Secondly, the most obvious and enormous challenge that we'll most likely face at the highest levels of Fractals will be the fractal specific condition known as agony. Of course, agony can be countered by agony resistance, but as it stands, our current max is 85 AR without having to shell out huge sums of money to buy the mega size infusions that can be crafted. Now, it was mentioned in the blog post as well that a new type of consumable will be available to aid us in the Fractals, which won't conflict with the currently known foods and consumables. So we can assume that these might give us an advantage in our fights against agony, possibly by simply unlocking the vendor within the Mistlock Observatory. But assuming the agony damage keeps the trend going, we'll be needing a good chunk more. So imagine if the Mastery line also unlocked the possibility of infusing your armor pieces or weapons, essentially creating a cross-section between crafting, forging, and masteries. This way, players would have to play a fair amount of Fractals in order to advance their mastery level to a point where they could start infusing more things, which would let them enter the higher levels. This would essentially gate off all players from simply being able to rush to the top levels, since there's no currency involved. Apart from these examples, I can't really imagine that any of the masteries would include buffs to nullify the instabilities. I thoroughly believe that these instabilities should be very significant to players' party composition and stat choices, so we might get really challenging encounters to spice up our daily runs in several ways. All in all, I am so happy to see Fractals at least getting some very well-deserved love. I know this might not be the end-all be-all, but at least it's a step in the right direction, I believe. And if not, at least I'll finally get my Fractal Sword. But where are your thoughts on this? Is it too focused on skins, achievements, elitism, or is it really what the Fractal scene needs? Tell me in the comment section down below. Oh yeah, and if all these changes have gotten you excited enough to start looking at getting into the Fractal scene, or simply improve your skills there, go and check out how we do it in King. The guides may be a little outdated, but rest assured we'll be back with new ones once this all goes live. Until next time, I will see you in the mists.